Welcome back into Iggy Sports Talk. I'm your host, Jakey Nazuski, or Iggy for short. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this episode. But we are just a few days away from the 2024 NFL Draft. And if the draft has already passed by and you're still tuning into this episode, I still think that you could gain something from it, because I had the opportunity to speak with ESPN draft expert Mel Kiper Jr. about the transition that players have to go through from college into the NFL and how it can really be tough mentally to make that transition, and what he's seen from players over his 30, 40 years covering the league and the draft on how it's been successful for some players and how it hasn't been successful. But also, he breaks down how teams and organizations have learned over the last few years, since mental health has become a lot more prevalent, on how to make that transition as smooth as possible. So I really hope that you enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you resonate with it as well, because we've seen players like Ryan Leaf, Johnny Manziel, Zach Wilson, as recent in the last few years, really struggle mentally to be able to make that transition and feel that pressure of being a high draft pick and have it deter their play. And as we all know, and as I speak about on this podcast specifically, is that it's more mental than physical with these sports. And the more that I can help you learn about that mental side, the more that I feel like I'm achieving my goal each and every single episode. So real quick, before we get into my conversation with Mel, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever audio platform that you're listening to, so then you get updates when I drop episodes, so you can continue to learn more about the deeper aspects of sports and life. But without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Mel. I'm curious how the mental side of draft evaluations has evolved throughout the years, especially since mental health is becoming a lot more well-known and prevalent these days.
Yeah, everybody's always looked at every aspect of a player. I mean, I can go back when I started in the late 70s. It was always, excuse me, everybody did their due diligence. Everybody looked at every aspect. You talked to high school coaches. You talked to every college coach. Talk to everybody around that player. Anything you can find. That was your job. Is to basically, that was a scout's job, to be out there doing all that work, all that research on every player. That's why everybody team to team, all the evaluations are different. That's why doing mock drafts is so hard, because everybody's opinions are different. They're not high on a guy. Other teams are very high on that player. So that's why what I try to do is step back at some point from the mock drafts and say, okay, what do I think? When I put my name on those ratings, that's my opinion. So I have to go at the end of the day. You hear a million things, you see a million things as you look at games from their freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. So you're looking at a lot of different variations of players when they were hurt, when they were healthy, different systems, different coaches. And you got to try to put it all together. And it's not easy. This is not an exact science. No matter what you do, no matter how much technology you have at your disposal, no matter how many draft systems or philosophies you have or algorithms you have or whatever you have, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be mistakes made. I bring up the Chiefs all the time. If the Chiefs would have been able to trade for Paxton Lynch, they wouldn't have drafted Patrick Mahomes. They wouldn't have traded down that year and gotten Chris Jones. So had one move been made where they would have gotten Paxton Lynch in a trade, which they didn't work out. Denver did it instead of them. They wouldn't have had Chris Jones. They wouldn't have had Patrick Mahomes. So there you go. That's just one little instance, one little move can impact your future of your entire football team. So that's how fragile the draft is in terms of these evaluations and these decisions are made. And it's been like that since I started in the late 70s.
And then just a quick follow-up. I was curious, is there anything that you've seen or heard from teams that they've maybe done differently in the last few years or so to help guys mentally transition to the NFL a little bit easier, rather than, what we saw from a few years ago?
Well, there's no easy way. College, it's not the NFL. We can talk about how great the SEC is. It's not the NFL. I always saw that there's a lot of AOGs in college and other occupation guys, and that's who you're working against. Guys you get in the NFL, it's a huge mental adjustment. It's a physical adjustment. It's a mental adjustment. A lot of guys get kind of kicked to the curb early because they can't handle it. It's just too much. And we talk about everybody loves football, but what's the degree of love? There's got to be you got to be at a 10 when you get in the NFL. You got to love the grind of football. What you got to do during the off season. It's not just about once you get the money, how does your love of the game drop back a little bit? Now you've gotten the goal of being an NFL player. You still got to grind, because this is the best in the world playing in the NFL. And these kids sometimes just don't realize that till it's too late. And you got to keep trying to get better. What worked in college won't work in the NFL. So to your point about the mental side of it is huge. And teams have to obviously hope that you get players that can handle that pressure and the expectations that come along with being an NFL player. So that's all part of it. So you gotta evaluate players. I've always said in totality, that mental part of it is huge.
Appreciate it, Mel.
Sure.
I hope that you did enjoy my conversation with Mel Kiper and got a little bit of a better understanding of how teams and organizations have helped players over the last few years make that transition to the NFL easier, especially from a mental side. And so many times I feel like when we're watching the draft, we see these amazing moments for these players and some of the best players in all of the world. And we just think about, their college stats and what we saw them do in college. And then, when they go to the NFL and they struggle or aren't the same player as they were in college, we attribute it all to their physical game and, they're just not good enough. But a lot of times it's mental. And so that's why I thought it was interesting to hear more about Mel's insight on what he's seen from players, but also from the team perspective as well, on how that mental side really plays a big factor in being able to help a player transition smoothly into the league from college. And, I continue to speak about this mental side in sports, but also in life on this podcast bi-weekly. So if you have not yet, make sure to subscribe to Iggy Sports Talk on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, it's all on there. And also make sure to follow Iggy Sports Talk on Instagram so you get updates regarding the podcast, as well as I post videos that really speak about the deeper aspects of sports from an athlete side or, different things like that. So make sure you go over and follow over there. But as always, I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. The support on the podcast has been incredible. And the more that I can help you learn about the deeper aspects of sports and really be able to help you overcome your own mental health struggles, the more I feel like I'm achieving my goal each and every single episode. So hope everybody has a great rest of their day. And I'll see you and talk to you next time. Peace.